Hi, this is Pete. I'm going to be experimenting with what's called a shift register, which is a chip that allows me to use only a handful or a couple of analog outs to control a whole bunch of LEDs. Um, shift registers are really, actually just regular output pins, not analog outs rather. But shift registers are really useful in general. So hopefully I can get this to work here. So I'm going to stand it up right here. Can you see my board? No. All right. I'm assuming that you can see it because I can't see my. So basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to be getting 8 LEDs to be controlled with only 2 outputs. And yeah, that looks like that. That'll look right there if I can prop that up. I'll prop it up against my computer. There we go. And the wiring here is tricky because I am going to be working with a bunch of wires because 8 LEDs, each one requires its own resistor. And so I'm just going to start by putting the LEDs in first, and then I'm going to put the shift register in separately. And essentially what happens is all of the pathways are going to go through the shift register into the LEDs, into the resistors, and then back into the Arduino board. And the Arduino board only has 3 outputs that's going to be controlling all 8 of these LEDs. So I don't know if I said 3 or 4 or 2 originally, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this across a lot of space. I'm going to be using a lot of space on the board, just so that way we make sure that I get it all right here, and that way you can see exactly what I'm doing. I think that looks okay. So right now I'm putting in my LEDs, and the way that you have to know that the long side of the LED, that is the one that goes, the long side of the LED, I was doing it backwards, is in general the one that you want going into the board, and the short side is the one that you want going into your resistor, and that actually matters. It will not work otherwise, so you have to pay close attention to your circuit diagrams when you're working with stuff like this to make sure that you're actually putting them in the correct orientation. And so I'm putting the long ones on the right side because that is where the wires are going to be coming in, and then the short ones on the left side because that's where I'm going to have all of my resistors that are just going to be going to a ground and complete my circuit here. Okay, so I have my 8 LEDs in, and now, oops, I put this right on top of where I have all of my wires, which was kind of a mistake for me. Silly. So I have all my wires in here, and I'm going to be trying to keep it as neat and clean as I can with these wires. That is always the challenge with working with wires that you don't control the length of, is that you kind of, it can get very messy very quickly, and so whenever possible, you want to be controlling the length of your wires by just by trimming your own wires. But for this one, I'm just going to be using pre-trimmed wires, and we'll see how well that works. And so I'm taking these orange wires right here, and the orange wires basically, the whole point of these wires is they are going to be bridging the gap between the LED, the short pin on the LED here, and where I'm going to have the resistors going into the ground. And the reason I'm doing it this way it's just simplifying it for me for later. Because all of the resistors have to go into the ground. All of the LEDs need an individual resistor of their own. And if I had shorter guys, I think I would be using those right now. So this is definitely one of the disadvantages of using pre-cuts. But since we're just doing this as a quick experiment, I'm just going to do it here. And certainly if there's any part of this that I can speed up in the editing room, I will edit that. Otherwise, you just get to listen to me jabber on while I'm doing this part here. And so the reason I'm doing these ones first is because this is going to get messy pretty quickly. It's going to have a lot of wires in it soon. And so I was thinking that I wanted to just get out of the way kind of the basic ones to make sure those pathways are nice and clean. And of course, you can always test your pathways using a digital multimeter, which we have here in the case over there. I'm not going to be doing it here because it's going to take long enough just putting in all of these wires and making sure everything is correct. So far I've had enough of these orange guys. I think this is because Matthew, one of the students, helped me last time by putting all of the like colors together, and so it was easy to grab a bunch of the same size and color, and there we go. So I have my eight orange cables. Each one of these is in line with the short side of each one of these LEDs, and now all I need to do is grab my 220 resistors, which, since we do a lot of work in our class with we do a tremendous amount of work with LEDs, and so almost all of the resistors we have are 220s, because the LEDs we have, that's what they require, either 220s or 330s, I believe. And so we're just going to take each one of these LEDs here, and I just know, because we've been using them so often, which ones are 220s. But remember, the reason that you have all these nice little colors on the top of your resistor is to let you know what kind of resistor it is. And so just make sure that if you're doing this yourself, and you check out your colors, because that little pattern is meaningful, and it's universal to my knowledge. I think that around the world, that is the universal language of resistors, which is really neat, because not a lot of other technologies share the same kind of universality. I also like it because it's a neat aesthetic that gives resistors this nice little, they kind of remind me of fishing lures or bugs, like if you have a friend who goes fishing a lot, they might look at those little patterns on the back of the resistors, and it might remind them of fly fishing, because of course when you go fly fishing you have to have fairly elaborate colors on the back of your flies, as they call them, I guess. Of course, I don't know a lot about fly fishing, so you can tell me I'm totally wrong. I am decked out in my ESC gear today. Just noticed looking at that. It's just coincidental. That's just because of what I grabbed this morning. It was not because I wanted to advertise. So, and I'm going to put in the last resistor. And these ones, because I got these as part of a kit, these ones are a little harder to read the colors, even though I'm praising how nice the colors are. The colors are not as easy to notice as like what I would say standard resistors. You'll see these resistors I'm using are blue. The ones I kind of learned how to use originally, those ones were not blue. They were tan, and it made it so much easier to pick up the actual color. So what I have here is called a shift register, and the orientation is really important. This one is the 74HC595N, and you want to orientate it in this particular one where the number piece is facing, so it's backwards to me, so it's facing where the LEDs actually are. I know that that won't make sense if you're kind of following along at home, but it's just to say that the orientation is meaningful. There's a little dot on the side there that you can actually notice that helps you orientate it. You probably can't pick it up on the picture there. But also notice I'm bridging the gap on this breadboard so as to separate out each side, because I'll be using different things on the sides and different cables, as it were. And let's see, what do I want to use? So a lot of people focus a lot on trying to keep the color scheme the same for each one of their different types of whatever they're doing, which makes sense. I tend to I try to keep the colors the same if I'm using a bunch of colors, if I have those colors freely available, like I have right now. I have a bunch of pre-cuts, as I said, but I don't really commit a use to each particular color unless it's just power and ground. So power is red and ground is black. That's an easy thing for you to know. So whenever you're doing your direct power, you do that. And then the other ones, it's really up to you how you want to do that. So now here, basically, what I have is I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I have 8 pins coming out this side, and it looks like, sorry, I'm looking at I have a diagram behind me, so it's helping me track what goes where. It looks like it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of those 8 are going to LEDs, and then 1 on the other side is going to an LED. And I know that sounds a little confusing, but in my diagram, for some reason, it has them go around in a really funny circle. I'm going to attempt to have them just connect directly to it, which may or may not be the proper choice here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my pin that is all the way over, or my second to last pin here, and I'm going to go into the power side of my last LED. And the reason I'm doing that one first is not because it will make it easier for me, because now I'm going to have to go through it for all the rest of them. It's just because I'm nervous about the length of my wires, and so I want to make sure I'm using the long ones correctly first, and I'm just going to go over with each one. So this one goes just over 1, and then it goes into and so we're going into basically the long end side of that LED. Now, the thing to remember about breadboards is that breadboards are just wire replacements. They're just ways for you to avoid having to solder a lot of wires. And like if you're actually building something with a bunch of LEDs, if you're building like a real version of this to sell or as an exhibit, trying to build something out in the world, you probably wouldn't even use a breadboard. Breadboards are mainly just used to experiment with, to quickly prototype something, and then once you really are doing something in the world, just like I'm using these pre-cuts, you wouldn't use pre-cut, you would use the exact measurement, and you would just go directly from one thing to the other thing. You would just solder it, and soldering is basically, it's just a material that's metal-like. I think is a type of metal. I think it's probably lead, or a lead mixed with some other stuff, and called sod, I believe. And you kind of melt that. It has a very relatively low melting point. You melt that and connect two other pieces of metal, and so it's a good conductor. It's a little dangerous because it does take a lot of heat to melt it, even though I said it had a low melting point. So it's just something to track. Okay, so now all of my LEDs except one are hooked up, and the only one I have to do is going to be on the other side, and that is going to be the second one in on the other side. Now I believe that is correct. Now I have two different wire diagrams, and so I can double check my wire diagram here and just see here, make sure that these are LED, LED. Yeah, so it's Q1 through Q7. And then this guy from the other side is called Q0. And so when you generally, like if I bought this shift register separately, I would have been giving like a nice little diagram, which would show me all of the stuff I just explained to you. So it would just show me what goes where in essence. So now at this point, we're doing pretty well. We have all of the LEDs are now hooked into the correct spots in the shift register. And there is a black wire that I do need for the shift register, which is this last pin on the shift register on the side of the LEDs. That just goes into the ground. And I'm just going to poke that into the ground right here. And so you can see so far we're looking pretty good. It looks pretty nice. It's pretty neatly done. Okay, and so now on this side, I have 3 pins that are data pins, and we're going to use blue for data. And those are the data pins are going to go right into my Arduino board. So 1, 2, 3. Let's see if I can find another. There we go. So I have 3 data pin cords right here, and then I have 2 power pins, which are going to also go into the Arduino via the power cord. I'm just tracking everything. Yeah, so those just 2 power guys, and also 1 more ground as well. Okay, so we'll do the ground, which just is easy because that just goes into the ground, and I'm going to use the same. I'm actually just going to shift this guy over 1. We'll go back there, so I keep all my grounds over there, and this one. It's hard to see. It goes in 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'll just double check. It looks like it's 4 in from the right, and to double check here, it is VCC, Q0, DS, and then OE, and OE is the one that indeed goes to, it looks like it goes to my ground. That is correct. Cool. So we'll do that. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, OE. Now, it would be nicer if this shift register was a little bigger and I could actually see what I'm working with here, but it's fine. Let's grab a couple red guys. Here's one red, here's another red. Is that too long? Yeah, that's too long. Okay, that's long too. Oh, maybe I don't have any other short reds. Well, I will find the short red here. Okay, so the first pin on this side goes into power, and so I just put power there, and then the second to last pin, I believe, on this side, which would be 1, 2, 3, yep, right there. That also goes into power, and we're going to have power just coming right from the Arduino, and then our data pins are the ones that fill in all of those other ones. So I have 3 left over, and sure enough, those will all go to my data guys, and I'm just going to go right in first. 1, 2, 3. So these are the ones that are going to be grabbing data and controlling these LEDs from the Arduino. And then I have 1 power and 1 ground cable left. Those are my only other cables. So how about that? So not as hard as I guess it looks at first. You know, when you first see a diagram that has like a ton of cables, you get really nervous. So right here, I just put my power right there, and I'll just put my ground right there. Okay, so then all these guys hanging off, and I can actually do that. I can put my cords away for now, because I don't need any more cabling. There we go. And it is good to try to keep everything neat and organized as much as you can, because it saves you time later. So I have all this stuff here, as you can see. Ooh, pretty. And then I have my Arduino right here. Now, of course, the thing that's missing from the Arduino is the power and the code. So if you bear with me for a second, I will make sure I load the code up because that's probably pretty important. But while that's loading, I will connect the appropriate powers here. So I have this, I want to flip this here. And so on the power side, I want this one cable to go into my 5 volts, which is right there. And then I want my one ground. So we're just going to put it in on this ground on this side. There's a GND ground. And then our 3 data cables are going to go into 4, 5, and 6 in the order that I plug them in. So let's make sure I do that correctly, because that all the data, you know, one cable in the wrong spot, as you have experienced, I'm sure, nothing works because you know, the data gets all scrambled. So 4, 5, and 6. Cool. So now all of my wiring there is complete, and let me just make sure that my Arduino program is correct. Nope. So in Arduino they're called sketches. So the 8 LEDs in the shift register sketch is the one I just loaded up here. And I'm going to hook in my power, which is a USB, and it also is my data. And so there we go. And look at that. It's already doing something, which is good. That's so far so good, right? Oh, you can't see that. So let me first tools. Let's grab the right port. That guy. And then we're going to upload this code here. And so now the code is uploaded, and look at that. You can see the shift register is doing its job. It's actually, whoops, I don't know if you can see it. There it is. It is cycling through. Now, I do notice that 2 of the LEDs are pretty weak, but that's because of the LEDs. There's nothing wrong. They are lighting up. They're just burnt out or something. Let's see if I can play around with this. No, those guys are just weak old LEDs. But yep, how about that? So if you take your time and you do the wiring right, you can make it so that this works. Now I will swap out these 2 LEDs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just pull out this power for a second, and let me swap out the 2. I think it was this one red one, and then there's one green one right here. Let's swap those guys out for you. With a different red and green one, so that way you can see. Now, if it still doesn't work, it could be any other place. Could be that let's see here. It could just be that they are, maybe one of the wires has a little fault in it, something like that. So we put these LEDs in, and we will try one more time. Oop. There we go. Okay, they're still super weak. All right, that's good to know. And so now here I can actually show you why those guys are super weak. Remember when I was looking at my resistors, it looks like I slipped in some more powerful resistors to those 2 locations. So 2 of these resistors don't match the others, and sure enough, that's what's causing some super weak LED action there. But still, everything works. Just have to remember to take more care with our resistors, and thank you.